Before I had time to figure out what to do, they hit me in a way that I immediately fell down, and they hit me with a stick and with some kind of a pipe. Baston, mysterious and at the same time beloved weapon of Sicilian Mafia. Starting from 16th century in the center of Italy, there was a vigorous period of documents about baston handling. Continuation of Sicilian documentary episode, a tradition which went through numerous centuries, a technique which still exists and being used by criminal tradition nowadays. It took me 1 month to find the guy, but when I found him, I broke his legs and jaw. What modern Sicilian masters can offer today in terms of self-defense in extreme situations? In principle, this stick is impractical. Battle will end too fast and not in favor of those with a stick. What does masters teach in Sicily today, and what relation does it have to genuine tradition of Sicily? We looked up basically for all documents on sticks that exist now in Italy. Sensational investigation of Unsolved Crimes newspaper. It has been not that short moving forward from Sicilian conquest by legendary thousand of Giuseppe Garibaldi. Nevertheless, weapon arsenal of criminal Italy has not changed in principle. What has changed is shooting range and casualty producing properties of firearms. However, diapason of bladed weapons is almost the same, and same thing applies to the role of Italian baston. Dramatic and extremely effective instrument in close-range distance. It comes as no surprise that it is considered to be a favorite weapon of Sicilian Mafia. But there is one catch. Look attentively at bastons that were inseparable parts of first persons of Sicilian families. Likewise, look at the technique, how these bastons were used to deliver strikes. And now, pay attention to what is being offered as bastons by Sicilian masters today. Obviously, it is somewhat another type of stick, with different form of what we have seen in archive footages. There are a lot of contradictory opinions related to this topic. And that would exactly grab my attention as a journalist criminologist. And I have decided to find out what is being taught by Sicilian masters and what the systems have to do with genuine traditions of Sicily. And in order to get this done, I've got in touch with an expert, my friend, my teacher, and my mentor, Dr. Maltsev. If we look at this from the point of criminalistics, then it has to be said that the sticks have certain designation. It is either a substitute of weapon. See, if there's an edged weapon, you still have those skills, but you use it with a stick. Or it is a container where an edged weapon is hidden. Or it is an improvised weapon, meaning that a stick is used when there is no blade weapon. If we are talking about medieval history, there are some moments in history that let us know that majority of people and nations regarded a stick as a sacred thing. And this is completely another topic. I would even say that it has to do with spirituality. Enough as it is, investigation has 4 directions. A stick as a substitute of weapon, a stick as a container, a stick as an improvised weapon, and a stick as a religious symbol. Obviously, a long baston is certainly not a container for transportation of stilettos and other types of weapons. In order to dig into the origins and nature of this baston, let's take a tour into University of Bologna and visit Dr. Maltsev's friend, Professor Antonio Mirandoni. Professor Mirandoni is one of the leading experts in the history of Italian weapons and martial arts and has unquestionable authority in this field. In the year of 2011, Antonio Mirandoni published a book about baston fencing in Italy. What was a surprise when we saw not a single historical confirmation of the existence of today's so-called Sicilian Bastons. There are treatises about cane fencing, about how it is handled, which replicates saber and an épée. I mean, there is documentation regarding these weapons. However, when we speak about this long stick, the one that people can see today on videos, for some reason we do not see any documentational confirmation. At the very least, that's strange. In such a case, what's the origin and nature of such a long baston? What about those long bastons? Bastone lunga. That is for shepherds. To be frank, this kind of sticks are not applicable in urban setting. Consequently, it is not used by criminals. Surely one would not be walking around with such a stick, that's for sure. Speaking of long baston, technique is the same. For the reason it was used by shepherds, as you cannot go in the city with a long stick. What is used in urban settings is the cane. Again, at the very least, it is strange. But we're not going to rely solely on expert opinion. Instead, we'll examine everything on our own. If long bastons in fact have relation to real Sicilian tradition, there has to be a certain trace in history, like in gravures, oil paintings, newspapers, and police protocols. Nevertheless, everything that we see just adds up to expert opinion of Dr. Maltsev. Historically, we do not see even one fact that would support validity of presence of today's Sicilian bastons. Well, things we see today are consequences. This is 21st century. Today, it is fun for people to train with a stick. But for what reason the stick is needed, I can't really tell. I mean, these sticks are not applicable in urban environment. Criminal tradition has never used such sticks. Well, in worst scenario, we do not have neither photographs nor documents. Besides, analysis of historical documents reveal that images on oil paintings strictly correspond to newspaper clippings and police protocols. We do not see long bastons. By contrast, practically everywhere we see the cane. With the object of researching the classification of sticks that were used in fact by criminal tradition, again we turn to experts. Sicilian stick, if we are speaking exactly about criminal tradition, it looks in the form of Neapolitan baston. I would call it even a marvel of Norman thought. It is not empty, it is solid and durable. For instance, there are ones made from ebony with Venetian hand grip. And when we speak of Venetian cane, it has to be said that it is designated to defend against blade weapons. It is not for offense, but for defense. During an interview, Dr. Maltsev has placed an emphasis on one more peculiarity. For a common person, it is hardly noticeable detail. But leaping ahead, let me tell you that this very moment became a turning point of our investigation. The fact of the matter is that such kind of group just does not exist. Not only in Sicily, but this group doesn't exist in Spain, in France, nowhere. It's just not there. Personally, I think that there could be one conclusion. That someone from people in power demonstrated this group out of convenience and everyone else just started repeating after him. We will get back to this moment in the second part of the investigation. And for now, why don't we look at the baston technique? Anyhow, we were not able to find Sicilian treatises about the technique of bastons. There are some works written in central part of inland Italy, nevertheless there are no documents as such on Sicily. This being the case, we are faced with a question of skills. From historical point of view, there has to be Spanish technique on the territory of Sicily. The Spanish wars, Naples and Kingdom of Two Sicilies has to have exclusive foundation of Spanish technique. Well, let us commence another criminalistic experiment regarding appropriateness of weaponry types. Historically, starting from 13th century, as a result of Sicilian evening supper, a power is seized by Spanish. In the course of 6 centuries, Spain held its power on Sicily. In such case, we could suppose that Italian technique of handling sticks has Spanish origin. For means of contrastive analysis, it is necessary to make a list of all types of weapons in the form of a stick that were ever seen in Italy. We are going to take use of fundamental scientific work of Professor Mirandone's book about Baston fencing in Italy. As you remember, Antonio Mirandone made a compilation of all existing photo facts and evidences about stick technique on the territory of Italy. Then we will compare this arsenal with all existing kinds of sticks in Spain, hereafter without comments. Speaking of Toledo, I've already demonstrated. I took border sword, opposed it to a stick, and distance was exactly in coherence with the grip I used.
Бывает такая, бывает другая, но смысл здесь. На болтах точно так же. Голова, шестопер.
As you can see, criminalistic experiment proves Spanish origin of stick handling technique in Italy. In such a manner, from historical view as well as from the view of correspondence of types of weapons, we arrive to full accordance. But in such a case, where from comes the baston? When you ask Raphael Irmino, Raphael, could you tell where the stick comes from? Well, in Raphael's opinion, its origin is sword. That it is a sword. Well, one may agree with this or disagree, but in any course, it is opinion of a master. I mean, as it's said on Sicily, if there's a question, there's an answer. That's it. We may definitely say that this baston has no relation whatsoever to Sicilian tradition. Nevertheless, everything has to have a reason. As you remember, in the point of Professor Mirandone, historically, technique of handling the stick belonged to shepherds. Generally, technique is based on turns, but this method is of country people. Long baston's technique is same everywhere, as it was used by shepherds. At this point, opinions of our experts go in different directions. Knights were nurtured right from the early childhood. See, seaman, he's always on board. He was brought up on a ship by going through constant training. But a shepherd, who trained him and for what? Yes, most importantly, for what? Curiously enough, when we look at long baston, we see that it does not have much applicability and functionality, meaning that we do not have medieval knight's outfit. Do you get what I mean? We do not see arming of a Norman knight nor Greek, as he has to have a shield.
Ни нормандского, ни греческого средневекового.
Correspondingly, not of a Spanish warrior, nor German, and not even Italian warrior from England.
Ни германского.
There are no answers whatsoever.
Итальянского воина с материковой части. Мы не получаем никаких ответов на вопросы.
Well, in such a case, let us go back to history again. Besides Spain, there was a major influence of Germany and France on Italy. We will try to find keys in fancy treatises. One may go through the same thing on his own. And here's the answer. Take a look at the positions in French fancy treatises. Now again, take a look at the moves demonstrated by Sicilian masters today. Foremost bottom line of investigation refers to French origin of the technique, which is being presented as Italian and Sicilian today. I've decided to ask a direct question to one of the experts. Would it be surprising for him to find out about French origin of the long Baston technique? No, it would not be surprising, and I'll explain now why it's no surprise. Piedmont is extremely aggressive and military state, and before 19th century they used to speak French, even now there are ones that do. They may not have known even Italian language. It was such an aggressive state that it was even planning to attack France. Just think, France, allegedly place of their origin. They were trying to conquer them. And if not for agreement processes, they would strike France. Thus, we found at least two different directions of stick techniques in Italy, Spanish and French ones. However, one of the key topics about stick grip which is used by Sicilian masters is still not answered. We cannot go further without expert help. Let me point out again that it is one of the peculiarities of Italians. They like to stand out. It might be even that one just came up with that grip only to make Baston Sicilian. Do I understand correctly that you recommend to search for an origin of this grip among authoritative figures, respectable ones, who came to Sicily or has returned? Let us assume that it is true. But then, who might have returned to Sicily and brought that very grip which was copied by numerous masters? Needless to say, such a person had to be an authority figure in Italy. It is necessary to narrow down the search field, otherwise this question will be left without an answer. See, it is not easy to earn reputation on Sicily. Basically criminal. Oh yes. Meaning that a man with reputation is solely a crime boss. Yes, exactly. In such circumstance, yes, uncompromisingly. So this might be a narrowed sphere to search. Exactly. Yet another conundrum. Now we have to find a man in the history of Sicily who was a criminal with reputation from one side, and from another, one who brought non-traditional and completely new stick grip to Sicily. By going through over and over numerous hours of documentaries in English and Italian languages, we find a well-deserved candidate, Lucky Luciano, unquestionable crime boss, who was deported from US to Italy in the middle of 20th century and spent the rest of his life in Naples. Hypothesis that I'm going to lay down now might look absolutely unexpected only from the first sight. Birthplace of this strange Italian stick grip, which is demonstrated today by masters on Sicily, is US. As it is known, in the United States of America, there are two games that became sort of a religion, and they are baseball and golf. By studying baseball bat grip, we come to conclusion that it doesn't resemble the way masters from Sicily handle the stick. However, golf grip is absolutely corresponding to stick handling by Sicilian masters today. It is not surprising that Lucky Luciano could have brought this grip to Naples As in US, golf is considered to be a game of the upper crust, Luciano being part of it during his stay in US. Conclusion that I draw on the basis of complex analysis of historical books, treatises, oil paintings, documents, gravures, and expert opinions looks in the following manner. From the point of criminal tradition, which is the most effective and went through numerous centuries and generations in Sicily, there are two directions of Baston handling. Spanish direction being inherent one, which corresponds to Palermitan side and right side of Sicily, with French technique of baston handling. As you remember, Palermitan side has two types of baston handling and fencing cane besides Spanish technique. Speaking of French direction on right side of Italy, the added peculiarity, the baston grip itself, which probably came to inland part of Italy from US golf club, together with criminal reputation of Lucky Luciano. At this point, we could have make it final. But even on this stage of investigation, I've decided to doubt validity of conclusions. Let us look at the architecture and traces of Italian sticks on fresco paintings and church paintings. As you remember, Dr. Maltsev considers one of the meanings of bastons as a religious symbol. Possibly. Right in here, we will find contradictions with implications of our investigation. However, even in the temple complexes, we find confirmation of double origin of sticks in Sicily. French and Spanish origins. We are left with our final experiment. Pay attention to Master Luciano Treminga's work and compare this Pulian technique with what is being displayed today by some of the masters on Sicily. As you can see, this technique has Pulian origin as well. Now everything on its own place. Spain, France, in Calabrian Pulian directions. This is definitive and ultimate proof of number of systems that formed modern technique of baston training. And only now we can make our investigation final. The goal of investigation was to create conditions so that each individual could make an objective choice regarding what he wants to deal with. French, Spanish, or Pulian system by means of which Karl V was able to conquer half of the world.
È società organizzata, 'ndrangheta, camorra e mafia, leggi d'onori, leggi